Well, hello, it's May 26th, and in 3 days I'm giving a presentation. I need to prep this SuperServer. When I say prep, I mean it's got no ESXi on there. And I'm going to put 6.0 update 2 on this Supermicro SuperServer 5028D-TN4T. Now, I'll go ahead and it's a fairly fresh laptop we're looking at. It's got a few little things installed, but basically, yeah, it's got Windows 10. And as you can tell, I recently put Chrome on there. Now, this video is going to be a little rougher around the edges than many I do. I am in quite the rush in that I fly in just a few hours today, and I got to pack everything up and get ready to go to the hotel room. All right, so what are we looking at? This is Ipmi. This is the remote user interface of the Supermicro SuperServer. And if you're not familiar with what I am talking about this system. Here's features and highlights. All right, so this model server, there's going to be some recommended BIOS settings. So if you Google for that, it comes up right on top. And let's move that to the right. So that's one of the first things we're going to do is make sure our BIOS is configured properly. So the very first step in here is to power on the machine, which I've done. I'll reboot so you don't feel like you missed any steps. And I've got a USB drive in there ready for VMware's ESXi. So I don't want to skip steps or have you feel like I might be skipping steps. Now to crank up the quality, when you use this Java iKVM viewer for Supermicro, for instance, if you have a motherboard that has a feature like this where you can remotely control it, well, this video specifically need to be Supermicro focused, where we're actually going to mount the ESXi ISO and install to the USB key. We don't actually need to make special boot media with Rufus or anything. We're going to keep it simple. Going into options preferences is going to get me a little better video display. So I'm going to crank it to enhanced text mode, image quality high, and some of the slight blur should go away, and the image quality on the left should be better. I'll also point out that baseboard management IP shows up by default. That's kind of a newer feature there. I hit delete to get into the BIOS. If I was physically near the machine, I'd hear a beep because I bought one of these bundles where those parts are included, including a speaker, which is handy. So it kind of cues you into when to hit delete. Now I'm on BIOS 1.1. And there's another article about downloading and installing BIOS 1.1 if you haven't done that yet. Again, I'm just Googling on the public internets there, and this is my article that tells you how to download and apply it. Okay, so recommended settings. There's an HTML video or there's words to follow along with. Let's just get started with restore optimized defaults. Say yes. And then save changes and reset and say yes. So we've just whipped through items 1, 2, 3, 4, and now it's got another reboot. So during this minute pause here, I'm going to get things situated where I can have words and I can have video. I could actually, I suppose, have both if I want. Let's try that. All right, we can peel that off. Drag that to the right. Can have words here. You get the idea. Video and words all on one screen. Depends if you're kind of a visual or a person that likes to read along. So after this boot completes on the left, I'm going to hit the delete key. And again, like no stone unturned or no step skipped. That's the logic is, I don't know if you bought your machine from Supermicro or where you got your similar motherboard. So I want to show you all the steps so you can have success with installing VMware pretty much no matter what. no matter how your machine came. If you did get it from Wired Zone, from these buy links here, well, your BIOS is already configured. You don't need to, you can skip this whole section and just get right to installing ESXi. All right, looks like somehow I missed hitting delete key at the right moment. Too busy talking. I am remotely controlling. I've got a remote desktop connection going to the laptop, and it does seem like it may have just simply dropped the keystroke. I do feel like I hit the delete key. So, unfortunately, looking at a reboot, that takes a minute. So again, another reason it's handy to have a speaker beep when it's done queuing in to pay attention and hit that delete key when you hear the beep. You don't get that luxury over iKVM. That'd be kind of cool if you did. You see, this is Java for now. It's going to be HTML5 compatible in the future. That'll be hopefully your way to remotely control Supermicro systems that have an IPMI level of 3.x or later. All right, I'm hitting delete. Entering setup echoed in the bottom left. I now know I'm in great shape. And I'm heading right to BIOS configuration. And actually the video was showing me following. It's got the, it's in the same spot. Okay, main screen, all the memory is configured and seen. I have 128 gig of RAM, all 4 memory DIMMs installed in this particular system. Heading over to gotta make sure I'm in the right spot in the video. Oh, load optimized settings. Okay, so we already got to that. We've rebooted, and we're back. All right, boot feature. Numlock off. It drives me nuts leaving that on. I like pushing and holding the button for 4 seconds before anything happens with power. And for me, I prefer it to stay off when I plug in. If you have an always-on machine or lights out data center, yeah, you're going to want that to always be on. I hit escape. Go down to Sata Configuration. And just check on things. So if I have a Samsung SSD here, I'm supposed to change it to solid state type. All right, gonna hit escape at the end. Move on over with the right arrow key. Notice I really didn't change much. Now on the boot screen, we're going to change from dual to UEFI, and this explains why. Okay, notice for many situations you won't need to change anything there. It'll just boot Windows if you already have it loaded, for instance, like the bundled one. But we're doing USB today. So if I want to look at the boot order, I don't actually want Windows 10, which I actually do have installed. I'm going to go with SanDisk UEFI. And save changes and reset. So basically we just whip through all these words in a visual manner. And there's a setting. So yeah, that way we don't have to pay attention at boot time. We are sure we're going to boot off of USB. Now there's a little more to it when you're doing ESXi. So let's go to virtual storage, ISO file, and browse our way to Okay, looks like I'm missing the hypervisor, so I've got to bear with me while I get the file. What I need is ESXi 6.0. Update 1. Okay, it's a few minutes later and ready to browse for that file. So there's the VMvisor installer. Open, and then now that the ISO file is pointed to, you need to plug it in. Click OK. So while I stepped away, the machine booted to Windows because it booted to the next operating system it found, since there was nothing on the USB stick. That's okay. We can just ignore that. And we're done with the BIOS settings. Okay, so this is the point where if you bought the machine, pre-configured with the BIOS and you've mounted the ISO, basically this is where the video would start. Now I know you're 11 minutes in already, and in our case we're going to hit F11 to invoke the boot menu. Let's see if I got that on time. Notice it says F11 to invoke boot menu. Why? Because we want to down arrow our way to the A10 virtual CD-ROM. That's the ESXi ISO we mounted, remember that? And there we go. In the interest of reducing some clutter and confusion, let's just minimize that. Okay, things are going to look like a normal ESXi install from here forward. Notice I, clicked with the mouse on that window to make sure it has focus. Now I'll move it away so you don't get distracted. Hitting enter and hitting F11. It's scanning for all possible boot targets. I should point out I have a Samsung 950 and a couple of two 950s and an 850. I don't want to boot from any of them. I want to boot from the SanDisk UltraFit 32 gig. That my Supermicro SuperServer Bundle 2 from Wired Zone came with. So just hit enter. It's warning me it will overwrite whatever's on that USB drive. I'm okay with that. I hit enter again, US default, enter. Okay, and if maybe, I don't know if this is the video you'd watch if you're very new to this, but maybe you are and never installed ESXi. Let me just show you. Here's the password I picked. It meets complexity requirements. It's got upper and lower, highly hackable. I wouldn't recommend it for production or something, but in a lab where you're trying to get a password that does upper, lower, number, and non-letter character. All right, ready for F11 to configure and install. So what it's doing now is, laying down ESXi on the USB key. Does this take slightly longer because we're going over a 1 gig connection or IPMI instead of shoving in physical boot media? Not that I can tell. It's not noticeable. I'll also point out whether you boot off of USB 2 in the front of the system or USB 3 ports in the back. I see no difference in speed even though it's a USB 3 device. In other words, ESXi, the hypervisor, laid down on flash media, it doesn't take advantage of USB 3 speed in any way, and it doesn't matter. It's just loading into RAM. So once the hypervisor's up, it's rarely writing to the USB drive. Okay, so logging and where it puts diagnostics, that's another matter for another time. But for today, you're going to see that it really is this easy to install ESXi. This video is focused on that, the install of ESXi. Probably not going to get a whole lot into the details of maybe configuring it, but there it is, it's installed. Now it talks about removing installation disk. So how would you do that? Virtual storage, plug out, click OK. You've now removed the CD. Back here, I clicked with the mouse to get focus to that window. I hit enter to reboot, and that's it. It's that easy to install ESXi in a Supermicro SuperServer 502AD-TN4T. And I'll just keep the video running a little longer. Why not? So you can see the other steps that are involved that I do when preparing for a demo. Again, this is just a temporary build. This is all going to get blown away, but really it's the same way I build anything in my home. And I do have a DCP server that's feeding a 192.168.1.10 to IPMI. It's going to feed out an IP address to the ESXi host we just created, server. I might go ahead and hard code that. So yeah, I'll leave it recording a little longer. And not a bad idea to make sure time protocol is working properly. So those are just some of the things. So as that comes up, what I could also do is get one of those videos going. So okay, so the gist of it is these are the steps, right? The basics of the steps. All right, now on the left, I'm just ignoring it. I don't need to specify boot order. It should just boot off of USB and have ESXi coming up. And indeed it is. Got a little resolution issue with 1920-1080 not being tall enough to show the whole screen, so we're missing a little bit on the bottom. But soon it won't matter. ESXi will come up at a more modest resolution that will easily fit in what you're seeing, a 1920 by 1080 window. By the way, if you're watching this video at any other resolution, things will be a little blurry. Tends to be best to watch on a full screen 1920 1080 session. There you go. There's the model of the machine showing the gigahertz. It's a Xeon D1540. Everything I'm showing you today should be the same in a 1541, and it shouldn't matter if you're in a 1567 or 1587. What are those? Let me show you. Here, I've got the ability to cast your vote. If you're watching this by the end of May, it's not June yet. Yeah, please vote for which of these systems you'd like to see. Right now we're looking at the 8-core that we're on. 1541 has replaced it, a quiet CPU replacement from Intel back in February of 2016. But what about a 12-core or 16-core? Would you like to see those bundled in, turnkey solutions at these price points? So go ahead and, cast your vote. Okay. Back to the system on the left. When VMware comes up, and it did, what's next? How about we try pointing our browser to it? And I was wrong. I guess the resolution is not really what I meant to do. There you go. Resolution is insufficient to see the F12 at the bottom there. That's a little bit annoying. So you could go to full screen mode. And, all right, it's complaining. Well, we can see the IP. We know how to get in. So let's go ahead and do that. And actually even better, let's edit a host file. Make things a little prettier. So if I go to command prompt as admin, say yes. I made a backup first in case I mess it up by accident. Okay, so that's what my system is called for the purposes of this demo. So now when I type in ESXi over here, how about, that's better. Okay, and we can drag a shortcut to here. Not the prettiest shortcut I made there, so let's try that again. There we go. All right, so now we have a shortcut to get to ESXi. What does it do? Well, how about the host client? That's what I want to bookmark. That's the UI. So what we could do is something like this. Whether you're logged in or not, we'll now have a sharp looking UI. And we can actually get rid of login. Just go to that. Okay. And we're in. So we have a server up. I mentioned I might want to configure NTP, but already you can see we have an insane amount of memory. There's things like pinning to the start bar and others that could be useful. I actually won't be using this laptop, so I'm not going to bother with all that in this video. I have other videos covering getting rid of the URL and shortcut bar and making things simpler. or prettier, I should say. So when we look at the server, CPU, all the 8 cores are seen, 16 logical processors, the build number, the BIOS level, everything is seen and looking very healthy. Storage, I've got no data stores, so we're going to need one of those. And interesting. The Samsung 950 that I threw NTFS on is not showing, so we're going to have to deal with that. But the 850 is ready for me to call a VMFS. Samsung 850 Evo. Okay, I'm going to do custom. And what I tend to do is something a little less. Let me explain. Let's say we take 1.82 times 0.9, and we can do our own we can prevent filling the drive completely. That can lead to issues. 1.638. So let's try to get to that. Sorry. So we've used up 90% of the drive. That way, if I accidentally fill the drive during the demo, I'm not going to degrade performance no matter what brand. Even if I use an old SSD, the SSD still has 10% unused space. So this little onboard controller can handle accidentally filling the entire drive. So if you use thin provision VMs on a VMFS data store, it's very easy to accidentally fill it to 100%, and performance can suffer. All right, enough of that. So we're in good shape. I've got a data store, and I mentioned all I want to do left, it would be to set the clock. Why do I have a data store? Well, I'm going to need to move some ISO files, install Windows and SUSE and Red Hat and others VMs, right? So when you get your ESXi host client, it's not quite the same as the vSphere client, which is going away. VMware's announced very publicly. The next version of vSphere released will not use the vSphere client, so I'm not even going to show that in this video. I'm going to use just this HTML5 client, period. Now if we go to host manage, it's not quite there yet with all the settings. Like hardware is a pretty limited view. For speed, I will say you get an instant power boost there at a slight decrement or a slight increase in watts used. But you will get better performance just making that one little change. All right, how about date and time? Finally, got so busy rambling on, I'm finally showing you what I should have shown you all along. You can use something like pool.ntp.org. There's many, and it depends on where you're in the world and so forth. But I want to do this start and stop with the host. That's the NTP time server. Save it. Hit refresh. Now notice it's still stopped, right? So the client is enabled. Let's go back and edit settings. But I have not actually manually started it. So actions. Whoops. Okay. So that's cool. Now the clock. You'll notice my local time is 10:33 a.m. Eastern. But on the bottom, everything is still showing there. So I want to get the clock a little closer to the actual time. Whoops. Woohoo. Little vSphere web UI problem. Well, that was kind of spectacular for a simple attempt at manually setting my clock, but let's see how we're doing. Go back to manage. date and time, edit settings, and notice the syntax. It saved what I was trying to do, which is interesting. All right, so now we got our clock correct. And look at that, everything still stayed set. NTP is running, and our clock is now in local time, including stuff that shows at the bottom. So at this point, I'm actually ready to create a virtual machine if I had something on the data stores. How about we put something on that Samsung 850 first? So data store browser, upload some good stuff to it. Let's head over to my PC. Oops. Not quite sure what happened there. I should probably create an ISO folder, by the way. Let's try that. Kind of looks like I'm having some kind of UI issue here. All right, so the file upload is perhaps already happening. Although it's still at 0%. How will we know if anything's happening? Good old task manager, performance, Ethernet, send. Well, doesn't look like that's going. Who knows, I may need to resort to vSphere client just one more time to get this going. Anyhow, my flight's in 3 hours. I'm ready to probably just push a couple of ISOs up to this data store, shut this ESXi host down, and off I go on my flight. I'll probably configure VCSA appliance too, but that's really a whole nother video for a whole nother time. That concludes this quick look, but we did have some problems with the UI, so let's try showing you vSphere client one more time. Again, don't get used to this. It's going away. The advantage of showing you this is, well, for one, I'll probably get some files moved to the data store properly and quickly. And two, I will show you the hardware health that looks better than the HTML5 UI, which just isn't there yet for hardware. So we go to configuration. There's a whole lot of detail, including fan RPMs, which is quite lovely. I've actually put some aftermarket fans in there to quiet the system down even more. It's not that bad by default. Okay. So yeah, just more mature. Hopefully this stuff will come soon. For everybody, yeah, that data store upload was not working. And there it goes. In only 2 minutes, it's shoving the files up at 380 megabits. That's more like it. So if you do create some VMs that you care about, particularly for a demo, you can set them to, start and stop with the system. Not a bad idea. DNS, talked a little bit about. The local UI. Kind of interesting how I put a dot there, but the local UI I mentioned, maybe you don't want to rely on DNS necessarily, or DHCP running. So we can go in here and hit F11, which is buried down at the bottom. Let's see if we can get that to show a little bit. There you go. F2. Nope, that's not it. Hang on. Customize system and view logs. All right, so we have an F2 problem. So let's go to macro. And when you get a new machine, this is something you'll want to know. Hotkey Settings. All right, F2 is what's assigned right now to exit remote location. Let's move it out of the way to something like F12. So we say Start, hit the F12 key on the keyboard. It learned it, hit Stop, and then say Assign. And there, close. So now, if you're an ESXi user, you're now no longer annoyed. F12 is a horrible idea, sorry. F12 we need. See in the bottom right there? Let's try that again. What was I thinking? Start, F11, Stop, Assign, Close. All right, so now when we hit F2, it actually works. It does what we want. And if we hit F12, it'll also do the shutdown thing. So you now have the keystrokes you need for VMware, where Supermicro's default Ipmi is not particularly friendly to that. You need to do some mapping. I'm glad that came up. That was kind of awesome, helpful. So for TCP/IP, it's on dynamic, right? Let's go ahead and just go to static and leave everything alone. Now I have a more robust demo. DNS we can leave alone, so I'm hitting escape. DNS suffix, the DHCP router fed that out. So a little weird syntax there. We're going to leave that alone. And hit escape, and it's going to say you want to test this and save it. So I say yes, I want to save it. Now we can just do a quick little test. It's pinging the gateway. Yep. DNS lookup's going to fail because I faked it with a host table. It's fine. So remember, if we go to Configure Management Network and go to DNS configuration, the host name is all set because the DHCP server gave it out. So I don't need to key that in. So this means I should be able to turn off my router and reboot this machine, and everything should still be hunky-dory. All right. My data store now has a VM. The first one I create is always something like this. I call it template and then the name of the VM. It's going to be modern. It's going to be Windows. Now you get the usual question. So if you haven't seen Host Client before, it's all pretty similar to vSphere Client. RAM, disk. I'm going to be a thin provision guy. Interesting that it was thin by default. So you can do something a little crazy. Like under VM options. Well, let me change to UEFI until it's already created. All right. But we could do even something like this. 62 terabyte thin provisioned. Just to be a little wacky. Do we need a network adapter? Sure. And what type? E1000. There is a problem with an unpatched one. You can get a purple screen if you use the best practices VMXNet 3. So usually my templates have VMXNet 3, and I will do that going forward once 6.1 or 6.5 or whatever they call it comes out. But for now, we're going to leave that alone and not mess with it too much. But we do need an operating system. That will help. Okay, so now we have an operating system mounted. Installer for Windows 10. And I'm ready to click Finish, but remember, I created a giant beyond 2 terabyte C drive, so there's no chance this thing's going to work. When we're done with getting it to work, it'll be converted into a template, by the way, once I have ECSA installed. Okay, so what do I have to change in this thing? Well, if you right-click it and go to Edit Settings, and then go to the come on. VM options page. Boot options. Change this to EFI type. And for the next boot, boot into the BIOS setup screen because I need to specify the boot order. see if I can get this working without that, just in case. So now we click this VM. Yep. Hit the space bar. And it's booting right off of the ISO file that we mounted. So it's pretty slick. I just showed you a modern way to install a VM stupidly with a ridiculously over, thin provisioned, but yeah, it works. So there you go, Windows is getting installed. All right. I guess the last thing that I'll have to do is just figure out, whoops, it's not there yet. I jumped the gun. Shame on me. Is NVMe. I want to get my NVMe formatted. So I do Windows 10 Pro. There it is. 62 terabytes. Insane, right? Okay, so the install is now underway. VMFS. Let's see if we can get storage showing there. Add storage, disk, and they show up fine there. So how do we do that in the UI we're supposed to be getting used to? I don't actually know. How about we go to host? Yeah, this should work. By the way, there's how you enable SSH. So that's another thing you want to do with your VMs. Sorry, your ESXi host. Start and stop with a host, and manually start it. Oh, I'll need putty. Oops. Okay. So, going back to the host. Can we right-click and add storage from there? The answer appears to be no. How about on manage? Not doing it from there. Nope. So if you right-click on storage and say new data store, again, we have a little problem here. It doesn't present the Samsung 950s that I want to present, and one of them is actually blank. But they are visible. Okay, they're both NVMe, they're recognized. One has an operating system on there. I'm going to want to determine which one has an operating system. All right, that's pretty messy looking. It's having a little trouble rendering. Just not there yet. So I'm going to head back here and scroll to the right. All right, let's see. Storage devices. Highlight one NVMe at a time. This one has GPT on it. And this one has GPT on it. With a bunch of partitions. Looking rather Windowsy. This one doesn't look Windowsy because it has only one thing on there, one NTFS, so no Windows install. So we now know which one we want. This one that begins with DC11, not D405. So DC11 is the one that I can willingly obliterate. Let's see if I can get that done with the host client. Again, DC11, safe to obliterate. So what are my options when I right-click that? Wrong one, right? D4. So we point to the other one. Let's try that again. DC11, new data store. So yeah, we can still get the job done. Something like that. Okay. Another fail. So I'll have to head back to here. Add storage. DC11. Next. You can just move the decimal point down. So something like this. We can say 476.94 minus 47.7. So let's use 429. About 90%. All right. Okay, I think finally I'm ready to wrap things up. I know I said that earlier. Rebooting the host. Not a great idea if the VM isn't done being created. So let's see how the VM's doing. Bottom right corner, we have just finished. I'm going to go with Express. I know that's a bad idea. Probably won't even have a LAN. I just need a Windows 10 instance. And you'll know that, of course, we need to put VMware Tools on there. So I've now ended up showing you how very quickly, way under an hour, you can get ESXi going on your Supermicro SuperServer. First 12 minutes of this video were all about telling you what to do with the BIOS. Most people don't need to do that. As long as UEFI is turned on, it'll install off of USB just fine for ESXi. And then finally, configuring ESXi. Install just took, I don't know, 3-5 minutes. And the configuration obviously takes a bit longer to get up on your feet once things are running. So I've got to hurry up and, well, finish. The VCSA I might do. I'll probably end up doing that from a hotel room later. I just need to make sure that the ISO files that I need for everything are uploaded. So this ain't a bad time to kick off some more of those. So I have a folder of ISO files, and I'm just going to kick them all this way while I'm packing here. Huge amount of data can just shove up to the server. And there they go. Including a Server 2016 Technical Preview 5. That's being shoved up there now as well. Oh, while this Windows 10 instance wraps up its install, the only thing it needs is VMware Tools. So hopefully you found this getting started with ESXi and a Supermicro SuperServer video helpful. And thank you for watching and for visiting tinkertry.com.